As we've said many times before on Radio Verulam, we are blessed with a higher than average population of talented people here in Hertfordshire: artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and of course, writers. And my next guest is an author. Zoe Jasko has lived in some beautiful places around Britain and Europe, but it was to Hertfordshire that she returned for the setting for her collection of short stories, What the Wind Saw. And she's here today at Radio Verulam to tell us why. Zoe, welcome to Radio Verulam. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure. It's undoubtedly our pleasure. I've read your book, and it's a
Thank you.
terrific, eclectic collection of short stories, different styles, different time periods, different characters. What is it that binds it all together? What brings this short story into a collection?
Well, thank you for that. So this book of short stories, what binds it together is really, first of all, the setting. It's set in a really tight geographical area, and it's the area local to us in St Albans and me in Welwyn Garden City, where I live. So it's Wheat Hampstead, it's St Lawrence, the Aorts, Welwyn Garden, Hatfield, St Albans, and that beautiful country in between these places. So like a really tight area. So that's the first thing. The setting of the stories is very tight. And the second is the stories are really short. They're all about 2,000 words long. So they're ideal to read while you're having a cup of coffee or read them before you go to bed. So that brings them to collection. But I think what I want to say is that I didn't realize that I was writing a collection initially. I was just writing some short stories. And then as I saw it grow, I realized that it was a collection. And I didn't want to present it in a book like a kind of greatest hits all thrown together in a random order, because I don't really work like that. And I don't really like it so much. I wanted it to be much more like a music album or a photo album where each story has something to do with the one before. There's like a progression. So that's how I placed it into collection. And the title is what binds them all together. And the title came to me because as I was writing and researching the stories, I thought to myself, like you said earlier, there's a lot of different eras in the collection. There's Roman, there's Jacobean, there's contemporary, there's even the future. And I thought, kind of, what brings it all together? And I thought, well, I thought about the air, and I thought, are we breathing the same air as the Romans? So I went downstairs to my kids, who are all teenage boys, and they're doing their sciences. And I said, is there any more air than there's ever been? And they thought about it and went, no, there's no more air. So literally, we are breathing the same air as the Romans were, and the Celtics and the Britons. And I thought, that's it. If it's the same air, it's the same wind. And so I hit on the idea of the wind blowing over this lovely part of Hertfordshire where we live. And it's the wind that takes us on this journey and that brings all the stories together.
What a fantastic answer! That would, I can feel the wind myself now. I feel the wind, and wondering what the next story it's going to bring along. One of the unique features of the book, What the Wind Saw, Zoe, is the fabulous map that not only is on the first few pages, but forms the cover as well. Absolutely beautiful. Where did that come from?
The map is just gorgeous. So the map was designed by Stephen Hill, and he was the artist who did the map for the Centenary Walk at Welwyn Garden City. Some of your listeners may have walked the
Ah.
20K walk around the whole of the town. It's a beautiful walk, lots of fun. And he created the map for that. Because I knew him through my centenary work, I asked him to work on the map for my book. And he designed a beautiful bespoke map with all the places in the map that are in the book. And then he turned it into the cover for me and then created the color illustrations inside the book as well. So he has just made my book so beautiful, and I'm really, really grateful to him. And a lot of people are loving the book for the map as well as for the stories.
It is. It's a map you can stare at for a long time and see places that you recognise, and connections between different places, roads which go from one place to the other. It's a beautiful piece of art there. You say you wrote the stories not as greatest hits, but with a sort of connection from one to the next, or at least that's the way in which they're organized. Where did the inspiration for the individual stories come from, though?
So I have to say, it really is a COVID story. So I'm a performer, I'm a singer, and I run a opera company called Felici Opera, which some of your listeners might have come across because we perform quite a lot in that area. And when lockdown started in March 2020, all performance stopped. And as performers, we weren't allowed to perform for quite a long time. So from having lots and lots of work, I had no work. And instead, I started going for walks. And if you remember back at the time, it was a beautiful spring and we were allowed to walk close to our homes. So I went out into my local countryside, and it was like I suddenly had time and space and creativity that I hadn't had before. So I came across these places and started to think what might have happened here. And then as the lockdown eased, I could wander a bit further. So I came across places like the Devil's Dyke at Wheathampstead, which I didn't know about, and John Bunyan's Chimney at Coleman Green, and places like that. I already knew about the Palladian Church at St Lawrence and Shaw's Corner, but I had more time to kind of spend there and visit. And as I had that time and the space and the beautiful weather, I started to imagine who might have lived there, what might have happened, who might live there now, and what their lives might be. And that was the way in. And I made up these stories as I was walking. And because they're so short, I literally came home and scribbled them down. And that was their
So
genesis.
the stories are 2,000 words or less, you said. Is that what your
Roundabouts,
publisher said?
roundabout.
You need to do short stories of 2,000 words?
No, it was
Oh.
self-imposed. I liked the thought that it was really fun to go out for a walk, come up with the story and the characters, come home and write it. And I liked the fact that it was short. And then people that I showed them to were really keen and enthusiastic because they liked, I suppose, in the fast world that we live in, being able to read a story and finish it in one sitting and not have to, put your book aside and come back and go, oh no, where are the characters? What are they doing now? I've forgotten. Reread your way in. People have been really enthusiastic about that short nature. So no, it was very much self-imposed, but a lot of fun.
I can imagine it would be. And you have covered an awful lot of ground in these stories, a wide spectrum of characters.
Yeah.
You got references in there to John Bunyan, to a Roman general, to Esther Ranson,
Yeah.
of course, and the shredded wheat silos, which are in Welwyn Garden City. It's something which is very, very local, isn't it? Did you set out to have such a sort of wide spectrum when you sat down to write the book, or is that just where the inspiration came from?
Not really, but we live in such a fascinating and historic part of the country, don't we? I
Mm.
mean, wherever we look, there are interesting people who have lived and interesting people who live today. And even people who don't think themselves to be particularly interesting actually are. There are stories everywhere. So once I found my eyes were open to them, they just kind of they just rolled in really. Um, so yeah, it was good. I enjoyed
And do you
it.
have a favourite out of all of the stories? One which stands out for you,
Oh gosh, that's so
or one of, do
hard.
you have
That's
a favourite
really
child?
hard. No, you can't. No, I really feel like that. You can't say this is my favourite child. I mean, because I love our part of the world here in Hertfordshire, and I just find it so pretty, so interesting. All the stories mean something to me. I would say there are a few stories that are a bit personal. So there's one story set on No Man's Land Common in the 1940s, and that's inspired by my mum, who visited the Common after the war with her cousins. So that's quite a special story because although it's not a family story, she inspired it. One of the stories is quite autobiographical. That's a story called The Woman Who Lost Her Voice, The Muses. And there's quite a lot of me in that story. And it's also quite a silly story as well. It's a bit daft, anyone that reads it. And I quite like that. I quite like having a story that's a bit silly, really, as well as
I shall
serious.
turn to that one next. I've read
Okay.
some of the stories. My favourite so far is The Birthday, which I thought was a lovely story. In so few words to tell such a big story about somebody's life. I thought it was very clever,
Thank
if you don't mind
you.
me
Thank
saying.
you
It was
very much.
a lovely story as well.
That one also. So I was going to say that one also came from an experience in that I was working on the Welwyn Garden City Centenary project that was abandoned in 2020, but we'd already done a lot of work. So I was at the time thinking a lot about the 100 years of Welwyn Garden City and how it had grown and the people that had come and were the pioneers who established our town. So I was thinking a lot about that. And then my husband's grandmother celebrated her 100th birthday in February 2020, and it was pretty much the last thing that we were able to do. So that story came together from those two ideas, and I'm really pleased you like it.
I did genuinely like that one.
Thank
It's your
you.
first collection of stories. I think this is your first published collection of stories. Are you working on the next collection as well?
Yes, I am. I've got a collection that's in draft, and I'm working very hard on that at the moment. And that's a collection of longer stories. That's going to be 5 longer stories in the book, and they are also again on a theme, and that's a theme of paintings, paintings of animals. So a bit different.
Intriguing.
Allows me to be a bit more creative in a different way, and but still work on a theme which I really enjoy.
And it does say on your website that you're working on your first novel as well. Hope is Daffodil Bright. Tell us a little bit about that. What's it about?
Thank you. So that's also in a very nearly finished draft state. That's set in Cambridgeshire during the Second World War, and I'm very lucky that I've got some people who are specialists in the field who are now looking at the story. I think it's really important when a story is in draft to be checking it through with people who are experts and have a chance to put their comments against it. So that's where that is. And also, place is really important to me. And I know Cambridgeshire really well because it's where my family come from. I don't think that I don't think I'm very good at writing where place isn't important because it just provides the setting and for the way that the characters behave. So
It's a very
that's it.
strong reference point in writing.
Yeah, very much
Cool.
so.
So coming back to your collection, What the Wind Saw, what's been the reaction to it so far? Because it is published now, isn't it? It is available for people to buy.
Yes. So first of all, I was really lucky that I'm published by a St Albans publisher called The Endless Bookcase, and I was absolutely delighted to find out about them because it just seemed so right to me that a collection of stories based in the area with St Albans in the book actually was going to be published by a St Albans
There's a
publisher.
certain symmetry to it, isn't
So
there?
I was really excited about that. And as a publisher, they've just been absolutely brilliant. And Carla Morgana, just fantastic people who have helped me so much with the book at the Endless Bookcase. Well, initially we had wonderful feedback because we sent the draft manuscript to Robert Voss, the Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire, and when it was in draft form, and he absolutely loved it. And he asked if he could write a foreword to the book, which he did, and I'm just so grateful. And he said the most lovely things. So starting from him, who was one of the very first people to read the finished, the almost printed book, through to people like yourself who are just reading the stories now, I'm getting wonderful feedback. People who are loving it. They like to tell me what their favourite stories are. Some people I've met then start to think about the stories that they can now see around them. So they say, "Oh, this would make a good story," and then the conversation goes into what they would then write about, and that's rather lovely too. So I'm getting lots of really really positive feedback, which is great.
Wow. So how can people? We've talked about it, and
Thank
people will be getting very jealous because you and I have. We're talking like we're in the know
you.
on this one. How can people get their own copy of it? Where is it for sale?
So it's available online through my publisher, is the Endless Bookcase. It's also available through Amazon online and Barnes and Noble. It's also available through my website, which is www.zoejasco.com. It's available hard copy and also e-format. And later in the year, we're going to be launching an audio version as well. So it's going to be very accessible and easy to get hold of.
It is indeed a great read with something in for all tastes. An ideal book for a summer holiday, I would say. Just as you said before, you can dip into it and dip out of it without needing to relearn all the characters each time. It is a fabulous book,
Thank
especially for
you.
those of us who are fortunate enough to live in Hertfordshire and recognise the landmarks there. We wish you the very best of luck with this book and your next collection and the novel as well.
Thank you
And
so
thank you very
much.
much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us here today on
Bye-bye.
Radio Verulam.